Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel. It's 12:30 and we're going to hit the go button so that we can use the time that you have given us. It's fantastic to know there's lots of people out there listening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm joining you today from Camaragal land. My name is Káti Gapaillard, and I'm the CEO of the Fathering Project, and it gives me great pleasure to be your host and facilitator for today's panel discussion. For those of you who are new here, the Fathering Project is a national charity that changes children's lives by supporting and equipping dads and father figures in their most important role. We operate in all areas of the community, and we deliver evidence-based programs, services, and resources that provides wraparound support to all dads and father figures across Australia so they can be engaged and present for their children. So we're really glad that you can join us, as I mentioned, for this really, really important conversation on raising teen boys, something that can be as complex as it is rewarding. Connecting with your teenage son can feel like walking through a maze. You see him pull away, spending more time alone, and every time you try to reach him, it ends in frustration. If you feel that way, you're not alone. Many parents face the same struggles, and they're unsure of how to keep those communication channels open in a world that seems to make it harder every single day. Today's session, Showing Up for Teen Boys, Support, Boundaries, and Brave Conversations, is about exactly that. How we as parents and carers can stay present and supportive through what can be some of the most challenging years in a boy's life. Teenage boys are navigating a world that's changing fast, whether it's the influence of online culture, evolving ideas of masculinity, or their own emotional development. As adults and parents, we don't need to have all the answers. We often don't, but what we do need to do is to show up. And that's exactly what today is all about. How do we best show up for our teen boys? So we're incredibly lucky today to have three powerful voices joining us today, who I will now introduce. Rae Bonney OAM. Rae is an Australian workplace mental health specialist, qualified counsellor, and men and boys health advocate and practitioner, with a deep commitment to inspiring environments that support good mental health, safety, and well-being. In recognition of her outstanding contributions, Rae was awarded an Order of Australia Medal in 2025. Congratulations for her significant work in the field of mental health, particularly in men and boys' health. Rae also holds influential roles with the Australian Men's Health Forum and Global Action on Men's Health. Welcome, Rae.
Thank you very much, Káti. That was a beautiful introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
We're so delighted that you can join us today, Rae. I'll move on to Dr. James Brown. James is a clinical psychologist with 20 years of experience specializing in men's mental health and fatherhood. James currently lectures in clinical psychology at the University of New England. He completed a PhD on the importance of father-child relationships and also serves as a non-executive director at the Fathering Project. James, welcome to this panel today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation and also to share the stage with Tom and Rae.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Tom Harkin. Tom is a leading facilitator and founder of Tomorrow Architects, known for his work in behavioral change and transformational leadership development. He also co-founded Tomorrowman, which is a social enterprise that helps men redefine their own version of masculinity and expand their emotional range. A big welcome to you, Tom.
Thanks, Káti. Really happy to be here.
Fantastic. Now, we've got all the panel here today. We've got our attendees, and and over the next hour, we'll explore what it means to support teen boys with confidence, compassion, and clarity, as well as provide you, our listeners, with some practical solutions to take home. Now, some quick housekeeping. A reminder that we will have a Q&A session at the end of this discussion. So if you have any burning questions as we move through the discussion, please put them in the chat, and we'll try and answer as many as possible at the end. So let's jump in. Tom, let's start with you. Let's set the scene. Watching your teenage son pull away is one of the hardest parts of parenting. You and your team at Tomorrowman work with teen boys in schools every single week. What do you hear from them about what they wish the adults in their lives understood?
Great question to start off with. I think one of the things in your introduction to this panel that I found myself thinking about, I've been lucky enough to work with teenage boys and girls for the last 20 years or so. And some of those have been community programs where there might be multiple touch points, and have often had parents showing up at the end of those when they come to pick up their child, getting out of the car and coming up and saying, "Can I have a word?" And saying, "Hey, they're coming home with these kind of pieces of paper and things. We're seeing the messages that other people are writing for them and that you're writing for them about how amazing they are, how empathetic they are, how, inspiring they, all of these kind of things. We're not seeing that at home." Like, what's going on? We feel that we're being ripped off. And so I've always had a lot of empathy for parents through those teen years. You're often shut out of the best aspects and the most vulnerable aspects of your child as they kind of refocus towards their peers. And that can be really challenging. I've got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, so it's all ahead of me, both boys. But in answer to your question, it's kind of an interesting one. I think that because of the traditional stereotypes, boys voicing their needs and wishes isn't a very strong muscle necessarily. So, hearing that question, I can't actually picture a whole lot of times where boys have said, "I just wish for this from my parents," or "I just wish for that." One thing that does come to mind though, when I started the work with teenage boys, I was shocked. There was a particular exercise that we would run that would ultimately reflect on who are you most frustrated with in your life. And if you think under the frustration and the anger, and you were able just to talk from the hurt and where you felt let down, who's that person and what would you say to them if you didn't say it with anger and frustration? And then who's helped you out the most? Who do you look up to? Who do you want to be? And I was shocked at just how many teenage boys consistently spoke about their fathers as the person that they were most angry or frustrated with, and ultimately most let down by. And often there were kind of 3 themes that would come up, and it was a kind of 8 to 9 out of 10 type scenario. Every workshop, it was very common. And it would be he left, or rather than physically leaving, he left emotionally. He's vacant, doesn't seem to care who I am or understand me or ask about who I am, or to some of the worst outcomes that he stayed and has been, negative behaviours. But often this disconnect towards fathers, and often what the boys would then talk about would be an undervaluing of the emotional support that their mothers had played, if they had mothers in the household, and that they had taken them for granted, and that they felt some guilt, that they probably hadn't treated them that well, and that they wanted their mums to know, again, if they weren't embarrassed to say it, they'd be saying, "Thank you so much for always being there." So I think at heart, whether they're able to label it or not, it comes down to, I want connection. I want to know that you care about my world, and I want to feel valued and respected in your eyes, is something that I think is the undertone, the secret wishes, I'd say, of boys, not those that they're necessarily able to articulate all the time.
And that's mostly towards their dads.
Yeah. This kind of yearning for male connection, and feeling a bit bereft of it, and bereft of the quality that they want. And then this dichotomy or irony where they are getting emotional connection from their mothers, but they're often taking that for granted or going, too much, kind of, and then realizing, through some of the interventions that we run, we set up some thought experiments that bring a lot of perspective, and they find themselves realizing, oh, hang on a second, I'm taking that for granted. And I probably need to let mum know that she's an amazing support, and that it does matter, and that I don't always let her know, and I don't always treat her the way that I wish I should. Yeah.
I guess that works like everything else. You yearn for the thing you don't have, and you take for granted the thing that you do have, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
When a boy shares something like that in a workshop, how do the other boys usually respond?
Yeah, it's such a nice thing to have access to. When we came on to this panel just before it started, you know, I was just sharing, like, it's amazing to get to do this work. It's so rewarding, and we do get a vantage point into the secret life of boys and men. We work at both spectrum, but largely with teenage males, and they respond very consistently. They're hooked. You can hear a pin drop in the room. They want more. They respond with a lot of empathy and a lot of care. They'll often say, "The guys, I've never heard you speak like that. It was incredible, and I didn't know you felt that way. And I've just got so much respect for you that you were able to be that vulnerable in front of us." They want more of it, and then often they want to take part. The audience, they're like, "Okay, now that you've broken the ice, I've got something to say actually as well. If I know that I'm not going to be judged and I'm not going to be kicked out of the gang, then I'm up for this too." And so, yeah, it's almost a sigh of relief. And often teachers that are exposed to it in the room, they'll say, "I'm around these kids all the time. I never hear them talk like that. Talk with that level of emotional intelligence. I didn't even know they were capable of it, because we very rarely get to see it." And yeah, and that's a bit of a shame, you know what I mean? Like, we're not getting access to see this secret life of teenage boys, but they respond overwhelmingly positively.
It's great that you can get on that level with them and earn their trust so they can open up in that way. James, based on what Tom has just said about what boys want from their dads, from a clinical perspective, how can dads, parents, but dads specifically, approach their teen boys with, you know, specific topics of conversation in a way that builds connection rather than conflict, so that the boys feel that they're present and they're with them?
I think, first of all, we have to show interest in the things that they're interested in. You know, if we get opportunity to be with them and have time with them, you know, we really want to show interest in what are they fascinated by, what are they learning about, what's the music or the people that they're interested in, who are they following, and why, and to show real interest in them. You know, I think that we need to, you know, get in their shoes, even though the times are different perhaps to what they were when we were growing up. If we can just get in their shoes and walk in their paths each day of what life is like for them and show interest in them genuinely, I think that is a starting point. Because then when we do need to have a tough conversation, we might talk a little bit about that later as to how we might approach that. But we've got a reservoir of respect and trust then, don't we? If we've shown interest in them in all other ways and aspects, then we've really got a reservoir there to draw from when we need to have a tough conversation. And I think also we need to have a mindset of, I find sometimes amongst all adults, excuse me, not all adults, amongst some adults, there can be this real negativity about teenagers. You know, oh my gosh, teenagers. And, you know, I think that's a really poor starting point. They're fascinating. They are really interesting. As Tom's sharing in that workshop, some people are missing out on seeing them in their full stride as to who they are and what they're like, because we're just not showing that interest in them first and foremost, Káti. So yeah, I think that's a starting point, really, to show that curiosity, interest, and then that helps to set up the trust to be able to have some of those tougher conversations.
And James, thank you for that. What are some of the things that parents might unintentionally do that shut the conversation down? Because we don't want to obviously intentionally do anything, but we might do some of those things unintentionally.
I think we've all made this mistake. You know, we talk about the things that in hindsight really don't matter. You know, we get all upset and bothered about things that in the bigger picture won't matter. You know, that we want them to have tidy rooms. We want them to care about the way they wear their clothes for school, and that they get their homework and assignments done. And we certainly want to show care around those things, because we're trying to guide them into adulthood, and what it takes to be an adult is to have some personal order and you know, ability to carry yourself in the roles that you have in front of you. But we do give, probably, if you think of the time that we have, you know, there's been studies that do look at the amounts of time that parents have with their children throughout the developmental years. And, you know, dads, unfortunately, are sometimes scoring an hour a day, if we're lucky, in terms of involvement and engagement. And if you're spending most of that hour talking about some of those topics, you're missing out on opportunities to give to the really important ones, like, you know, identity, who they are, who they feel they're becoming, what are they interested in, where are they heading, and you know, what matters to them in this stage of life. What are their fears and their worries? What are they excited about? You know, these are the things we should give a lot more time to in our conversations, and less around the other things that in the big picture won't matter.
So what you and Tom are both saying, care and connection are really important here. And that means, you know, feeling safe in your home as well. So I'd like to ask Rae this question. Traditional notions of masculinity, Rae, often discourage boys from expressing that vulnerability, which can lead to emotional suppression and, you know, potential mental health issues. Yet we know that it's really important for men and boys to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to express themselves, especially in the home, so that, you know, they can be connected with their parents, especially their fathers. What do you think helps to create that kind of emotional safety in a home environment?
Thank you, and thank you to James and Tom for kicking things off so eloquently and providing a really good stage for me, because, you know, James, I think you mentioned a few times about being curious. I think that is one of the keys to safety. And I sort of also wanted to mention that, you know, about this panel today, with all due respect to the people I'm sitting with, you know, the voice most missing from today is the voice of, you know, of youth, of boys, whether that intersection of Gen Z and Alpha. So I've collected a lot of data from my clients who I work with. I've worked with hundreds of boys over the years. I'm very grateful. So I've gone to them and actually asked them these questions. So much of what I'm going to use today is from them. I'm also a mother of George, who's 27, and Rory, who's 16. So I've got two. So from the perspective, sorry. Oh, sorry, I thought somebody said something. From the perspective of safety in the home, it does come from our leaders, our parents, our caregivers. We have to be role modelling. We have to be showing how to care for ourselves first, right from the get-go. So most of my work will start upstream. I think the whole narrative around trying to fix boys is a danger that leads to unsafety, because, you know, they're setting them up for, not setting them up for success, telling them how difficult life is. And somebody referenced before about this is such a difficult time for boys. It's always been a difficult time for boys and men. Just now, we're only just now starting to recognise there are things that we need to be doing in raising boys that is different. And, you know, I was raised in the, you know, I was born in the 60s and raised primarily in the 70s, and I'm still very, very resonant of the disposability of men and boys, corporal punishment, sent to war, sent to mines, no showing of how to care for self. So a lot of those men who you're talking about being fathers, they now sit there as fathers. They didn't have that either, and now they don't have that support. So I know I'm going a bit off tangents, but we have to really be getting the picture right about safety. Being safe is having access to both parents. mentioned absent fathers before. One of my clients said, if only I could have access to my father, who I've been alienated from. And over the years, I could tell you probably a good 50 or 60 boys who have been alienated from their parents due to poor legal system and poor support. So there is a really, really big miss there with boys who just literally don't have access to a good male role model. That is also really unsafe. I remember a time when George told me something that changed my life and changed the way that I was raising my children. And George is beautiful, but at the age of 14, he's going through the biggest life change a human being will ever go through, puberty. And we really, really miss that one as well. That everything changes in that time for boys, but that's a time when we're projecting on them. You've got to be clean, you've got to be doing good grades, you've got to be behaving, you've got to be good to people. All this time they're changing. And so I was going through this angst with George. I'm on the phone to all of my friends going, oh, what do I do? He's so beautiful and now he's so disrespectful. And, I was using all this terminology, and he turned to me one day and he said, Mum, can you please stop talking to me, to your friends about me the way you are, because you have no idea what it feels like being me. He said, I don't have any idea.
We've lost you there for a second, Rae.
Realise.
We lost you there for a second, Rae. You were saying that George was saying you had no idea what he was feeling.
That's right. And he told me he didn't have any idea what he was feeling like either. And that was a light bulb moment where I realised it's not my job to make George into who I want him to be. It's my job to make George into who he already is. And that was a game changer. So in terms of safety, we really have to be looking, not pathologising boys through maladaptive behaviours. Maladaptive behaviours being, outbursts of emotion, not being able to regulate, high-risk behaviours, self-harming. They're not all times to come down on boys and tell them what they need to do. That's a time to be really aware that they are coping mechanisms. They're using those things to adjust, to cope, to manage in the absence of something else that we need to be there for.
Thank you, Rae. Yeah, sorry. Did you had something to say more? Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that and for being the voice of the teenagers. I also asked my son the same questions, so happy to bring that into the conversation as well. James, can I come to you now and ask you, please? Rae was just mentioning that emotional safety has a lot to do with having access to both parents and for the parents to understand them. We know that it is really important to create spaces in our homes that are emotionally safe, where our children feel, or our teenage boys feel, comfortable expressing their emotions without fear of judgment. What are some red flags that parents often miss or explain away when it comes to boys' mental health and when they're not feeling safe?
I think that, for example, just because your son spends a lot of time in their room, let's say, time on their own, time doing stuff without the family and things like that, we should be careful to not make assumptions that that is inherently bad or wrong, or there's something going on. That we do know, and it's for similar reasons to what Rae was talking about, the period of puberty. The adolescent brain is getting a hit of hormones every 60 seconds during certain periods of that time. They are tired, they are struggling at different points physically, emotionally, with all these sorts of things. And sometimes, we make wrong assumptions about that being a warning sign of something going on, and we invade their private space too much and, want to know what's happening and things like that. That's probably not, the real red flags of things, probably for our boys, we should be looking out of concerns of, are they lashing out in strange moments? Are they, losing their cool over certain things? And that might cause us to be a bit more curious, because it's that classic case of where we're seeing something above the surface that might give us something of an indication below the surface. I would advocate that for all families, they should be considering having rituals or traditions in their homes that regularly bring people together and give opportunity to talk. If we do that, we then create space of emotional safety where things can be raised. So if we're regularly having meals together, and I can't quote the stat right now, but that is on the decline in Western society, it's an easy hit for a lot of families. You know, turn off the TVs, and sit around and have a meal together, create conversation together, and you create opportunities of emotional safety where people can talk about things that are going on for them in the family. So that would be an easy example of that. And also it's the commonly advocated tip for parents of teenagers generally, which is the car. That you've got a captive audience, as they say, in many of the books written about teens. And if you are, instructing a young person to drive, for example, and you take them out on a long drive as an opportunity to practice those skills, but you're creating an opportunity, maybe after 20 hours of drive time, maybe when they've got a bit of competence, of emotional safety, to talk about things that they might want to talk about. And also permission to talk about some things that you'd like to talk about. That's a great opportunity, much better than swinging the bedroom door open, walking into a darkened space and going, what's going on and why are you not talking to me and what's happening in your life? You know, we really aren't going to get much more than a grizzly bear coming out of their cave in those instances. So I think in terms of, summarizing in my answer to your question there, if you want to create emotional safety and opportunities for young men to talk about what's going on for their world, create those traditions that there are these regular spaces where they know that they can talk and they can share what's going on in their world.
Thanks, James. And how do we balance that watchfulness that we parents seem to need to have with giving our teen boys their space? As you're saying, the fact that they're sitting in their room by themselves with the door closed is not inherently a problem. So how do we have that watchfulness that we parents seem to want with that? How do we balance it?
I think that that if you're having opportunity to regularly check in, touch base, talk with our teenagers, we're more likely to pick up on those things of concern and give them opportunity to raise them. I'd also probably say I wanted to talk about Tom's experience of he's got young boys at the moment, and if any of the audience do have young boys at the moment, I'd like to say invest in that time. That shows to earn great dividends. If you've got younger people in your life at the moment, that if you're really, really investing in being present in their lives, you're banking some really great deposits there that then comes to fruition in the teen years, where they're more willing and trusting in coming forward to you and talking about things that are of concern to them. And that's true for even for separated families, that is a reality in our world. So I don't want to sound like I'm only talking about the classic, kind of traditional family. It's true in the statistics as well, that when dad really invests that time in those early relationships, it really pays off in the teen years with them being a person of trust that they can come forward to. The other thing that I just also note here as well is that probably dads in particular underestimate their value. Father figures and fathers sometimes make the mistake, and particularly in the teen years, that they're not needed for whatever reasons. They don't think that they're the right person to talk to. They don't think that they've got much better to offer than maybe the mum or the teacher or the whoever it is in their world. I know from working with a lot of dads and also some of the research that I've done that is a common misunderstanding. In fact, there's a lot of good writers out there that have been really talking about how we can actually be one of the better options for a teenage boy in those years, and not for all of the reasons that we would commonly think of when it comes, to sometimes the stereotypes that you might think about that a bit. But there's something about our role modeling. There's something about our relatability. If you're a man and you start to share a story about when you made a mistake in your teenage years, and you open up and show that willingness to share your story, boy, do they tune in and listen. And are they really, even if they're not looking interested, they're really filing that one away. So we really do know that dads and father figures have a really great capacity in their abilities to relate to people in this era. Again, going back to my driving example, it's probably why in a lot of families, it seems to be that dads always seem to be keen to do that. They seem to realize that they've got some ability here, whatever you want to say why that is in terms of training to drive. But it's actually more to do with the fact that they've got a capacity to manage a little bit of risk and danger while allowing somebody boundaries to work through learning some important life lessons. That's what we bring to this space. And it's something that we should see as a great opportunity to relate to young boys in this era and to help them through these difficult moments in life that they might have.
Thank you, James. If I can go across to Tom here. Tom, you did mention that boys do open up in your workshops. We're talking about some of the struggles that they may have. What are some of the pressures that they say they're facing behind the scenes? Can you give us some insider knowledge, please?
Yeah, for sure. There's really solid themes to the challenges that young guys are facing with it when they do open up within the workshops. And there's a combination of things that they're usually dealing with. Often those that go first, it's something to do with their mental health. Often like young guys, and what it will be related to is I'm suffering anxiety, or I've had some depression. I haven't told any of my mates. I'm trying to work out how to work through that. And again, their mates will often be going, "Oh, I never knew. Like, thank you so much for telling us. Like, it's amazing to hear you talk about it." I'm not sure why they're often the first people. It's often the first thing to share. Maybe it's because it's something that they've been mulling over. And so that's often shared. The other core theme is around how am I stacking up against expectation? I'm not feeling man enough, or, as Rae was saying, some of the misdiagnosis of that maladaptive behavior, they'll often get up and talk about how they feel that they're misunderstood. And that might be from the schooling system. They feel that they're getting in trouble, that they've been labelled as a certain type of guy. And it's often their opportunity to talk to, I guess, the narrative that they haven't gotten to add to the mix, which is, yeah, I've been acting out, but there's this stuff going on underneath that I don't really know how to handle, whether it's a family dynamic at home or it's an injury with sport can often come up, like I've been identified with that. I don't know how to handle this thing. I'm not getting the energy out in the usual ways. And then there's just that other dynamic of belonging. Like, belonging is just so core. I want to belong. What do I belong to? Who do I belong to? And unfortunately, what we find is, again, even when we're working with adult males, like if we're in a country town working with adult males, the average age in the room would be about 50. You got 100 guys in the room. A question that we'll ask after it kind of reaches a certain level of honesty is, how often do you guys talk like this, or in what environments would you talk like this with other males? And the answer is thick and fast and always the same: never. Never have I been amongst a group of men talking like this. And it's the same answer amongst young men, so like half a century on the planet. And to Rae's point, that older generation will often say, "Hey, we missed out on all this stuff. We didn't get all that social emotional add-ons at school and things like that." And so we're trying to work out, how do we do that for our young guys who are often better at it than us? For the young guys themselves, that at times they're so good at playing the role, like looking like they don't need stuff, stacking up to the expectation of what a guy should look like, that it's often a revelation to them to hear that there are other layers, other versions of what they're going through. That, as Rae said again, like let me be me. Like, who am I under the surface of this stuff? And so those three things often are the things that they're battling with and trying to understand.
Thank you, Tom. Rae, Tom's been quoting you a little bit here, and I'd like to ask you now, is this consistent with what you've seen in your counselling work for boys and for men? What do you wish more people understood about the signs that their boys might be struggling and what their struggles are, the nature of those struggles?
Oh, firstly, I'd like to think that a lot of feedback I get from boys is that, again, parents think that they know what they are, so therefore they'll be labelled, you are lazy, you need to, you should, you have to. Whereas I think that when we're meeting boys actually where they are, and I think James said it perfectly about creating traditions that boys can step into and be part.
We lost you there again,
Values.
Rae. Yep.
Am I cutting out again?
Just once, yeah, you cut out.
Sorry,
yeah.
I tried to fix it before, but so you just have to let me know. But yeah, boys being able to step into these environments. We put so much weight on boys having to fix their own problems. You need to be better, you need to be smarter, you need to be faster, you need to be nicer. Whereas we need to be role modelling those behaviours ourselves, especially when you look at things like technology, where, you know, I was out somewhere the other day and at a play centre with my granddaughter, and, you know, the whole room was full of kids playing. Every parent at every table is on their phone. We need to be role modelling really well. And also I think either James or Tom referenced about, you know, this is an everyday thing. This isn't a fix-it approach. Okay, now we've got it. Now we've got the formula. Every day you need to show up for your children, and every day you need to show them who you are and how to do it, because they're looking to us. If we don't want our kids to be influenced by people that we don't want them influenced by, we have to be the biggest influence, and therefore we need to be present. And, you know, my son George lives in London, but I'm still present in his life every day. I show up for him every day. He's so busy, he often doesn't get back to me, but I like his Instagram posts. I send him a message, say, hey, that looks really cool. How's the weather today? Just the littlest things, just to let him know I'm his mum, I'm there, and I'm supporting him, I'm in his corner. And that doesn't take a lot, but the absence of that, and I think James mentioned this, is, you know, when kids get to a certain age, well, I better make the most of my teenager because they're going to not want anything to do with me soon. That's bullshit. I mean, sorry. I mean, that's rubbish, because if you have a relationship with somebody, i.e. your child, they're going to want to be part of your life. We have this tradition on every Monday. I show my granddaughter life. We hang out together, and then my 16-year-old joins it at the end of the day, and it's his responsibility to create an adventure for us. And on Monday, he created an adventure where we went to a reptile shop, and it just so happened the really cool reptile guy got all the snakes out and all the lizards out, and we had the greatest time. That's how you make tradition. That's how you keep your kids with you.
Connection is it,
Not like
isn't
my internet.
it? Tom, I'm coming back to you again here. In addition to what you've just shared, how have you seen peer pressure and social norms about being a man impact the way boys show up?
It's changed over time. I say that over the last 20 years of being in schools, I think that the change has been subtle, but it's also pretty powerful. So the traditional masculinity, the traditional stereotype is always there, and it has so much value. And to Rae's point, one of our approaches when we go into schools, the first thing that we get from the guys in workshops is defensiveness. So that's their starting stance. Usually what they'll say is, when we say, like, hey, what's today about? They generally say, like, you're about to tell us how we're supposed to be, and, you know, how we're stuffing up as blokes and what we need to be and all those kind of things. When they realise that we're actually asking them, it's a conversation, it's a dialogue, it's an exploration, and we believe they've got the answers, and we're there to kind of find out how masculinity is stacking up for them, what they deeply want. and what the best way forward for them is, for them to discover that, then that's where they all open up. That's where the defenses drop. That's where they're like, okay, we haven't had one of these before. We haven't had anyone genuinely ask us in a way that they believe that we actually have the answers, and provide a space for us to unpack that. So, sorry, your question.
Yeah, it was about really, peer pressure and social
Yes.
norms and how that impacts the ways that our boys show up.
That's
Because
right.
those are very serious things. Yeah.
So when it comes to the traditional stereotype, like our stance is there's so much value in that, like so much value in these traditional types of masculinity. However, if they become your only option, then you're limited in terms of the type of quality life that you can live. You need a range of emotional and social capabilities in order to live a well-rounded life. What we've seen change is it's gone from traditional masculinity to this more manosphere-influenced version of masculinity that they talk about within the room. There's more of a aesthetic to it, so that body image is becoming a rising issue that we're seeing within workshops, whereas in the past, that was coming up within the workshops for those identifying as female, that they were talking far more about those issues, but body dysmorphia and eating disorders and those kind of things showing up more and more within the male space. I need to look strong aesthetically. I need to look like what a man should look like. And then this idea of this kind of this layered misogyny that's coming in out of a fear of, or a perceived fear of, losing their space in society. Hey, women are rising, but where are we? Are we disposable, or do we have a role to play, and what is our role to play? And so more of this ideology coming in where they're looking for purpose and they're looking for their place, and they're spending an enormous amount of time on devices, which wasn't happening 20 years ago. And they are seeking answers. And because we're not great at the in real life dialogues, particularly at a peer level about the deeper issues, they will seek their answers online in ways that they're not having third eyes all over them or watching them. And so we need to just be aware of the places that they're going for those answers. And again, not shaming or judging them, just going, hey, what do you think is required from guys today? Tell me about it. And a part of that is, I think there has been a real, we were talking about the generations before, the shift between the generations. I think it is a different universe that young people are growing up within, and I'm talking more about the digital world. And so I think that there is an invitation to go back to the first answer of this conversation, curiosity being so big. I think that, yes, we can give guidance, but we have to take a stance of curiosity, because they're growing up in a different universe as guinea pigs, and they're the best people to tell us about what's going on in that universe, because often as adults, we're not there. We're not in the same technological echo chambers. You put your age in and it takes you to a different universe. You put your gender in and it takes you to a different universe. So there's a real opportunity here, I think, for parents to be asking very open, unbiased questions. Hey, tell me about it. Can you tell me about it? I'm intrigued. And I'm not going to bite at you or say, hey, that's not the right belief to have, or that's not a good one. But just ask them, hey, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that resonates with you? Do you feel that has resonance? Where do you think that works? Where don't you think it works? So they're the shifts that we've seen. Very similar, still about belonging, still about trying to have purpose, still about who am I, but the context has shifted. So the way that that's expressing itself has changed.
Yeah, so listening and understanding rather than correcting before you connect.
Yeah, and probably just the other two things to say that I think has changed. I think a lot of people are aware of this. Proximity has shifted. So both the schoolyard comes home because it's on the devices. So there's no reprieve from that social dynamic. There's much less reprieve from it. And the witnessing, I was saying before we jumped on this, that I remember being in schools where mobile phones started to become ubiquitous with teenagers, and the tone and the viciousness of the bullying went up so many notches. The things that I was hearing that they were saying to each other through these devices was just shocking. And then it became par for the course. It became more normalized because you can send a text. You don't have to see the face-to-face reaction of another peer. So proximity is really powerful. And I think it's changed the pressures that our young people are going through because they're living and growing up together in more distant ways. It's not all together in the same physical environments because they don't have devices. So they've got to get out on the street together or, you know, go out together. I think that's another huge change that we're seeing, a lack of in real life interpersonal capability, and some of the more negative impacts of a loss of proximity to each other.
I think your point about also belonging and wanting to have your father or parents there is key, and feeling their presence and their role modeling rather than some of the online role models that we see. Rae, can I come to you, please? In terms of many fathers grew up with, you mentioned before, with limited emotional role models themselves. How can they unlearn what no longer serves them and create a different experience for their sons? Rae, are you with us?
I think we might have lost Rae.
We just lost her.
There she is. She's coming back on. Did you hear that, Rae?
I'm afraid I didn't. I'm sorry, it dropped out completely.
That's all right. You've mentioned before that many fathers grew up with that limited emotional role models themselves. So how can they unlearn what no longer serves them and create a different experience for their sons?
In fact, going back to what Tom was saying, we had a bit of an offline conversation before. In the 15, 16 or so years I've been involved in men and boys health, we have come such an incredibly long way, and I'm so proud of Australia being probably the leader, I would say, in the world around mental health and what we're doing with men's health. We've got so much literature. We've got so many amazing organisations like the Fathering Project that provide spaces and places of all different varieties for men to connect with, to share with each other and learn. And I don't mean learning from a prescriptive methodology, but learning from each other's what's working, what's not working. And I think my experience of men is, you know, men having each other's back is a real thing, and men being together is such a powerful thing in terms of how they share information and how they care for each other. So organisations like the Fathering Project, Mr. Perfect, men's tables, there's just so many groups, or literature like, you know, Movember just recently produced a really cool report about boys in the digital landscape as well. I think that just came out last week. So anyone that's listening, you just dial up Movember and you'll see that report, which I think gives a very balanced view. It's not catastrophic. It really focuses on the positive elements of digital role models for boys and how they're using it, how they're connecting. So yeah, I think we just have a world now. We've got access to great information. Some information is not healthy. Just don't connect with it. You don't have to. We know what's healthy, we know what's not. That's why McDonald's exists. We know what's not healthy. We eat it. Yeah, so I think that it's an exciting time for dads. We're just moving into a space now where, you know, just over in the last probably year, since diversity, equity and inclusion policies have become real in workplaces, now it's permissible for men to take things like paternity leave, time off to care for their children when they're sick, and not be judged by those gender norms of men need to be at work. And not, oh, well, you're slacking off, or if they take paternity leave, are you having a holiday? No, I'm actually caring for my child. So I think we're slowly turning the Titanic. It's becoming a much better world for men and boys.
Yeah, that shifting culture of fatherhood that we're seeing as well allows dads to unlearn what doesn't really serve them any longer and create that different experience for their sons.
I would like to just challenge the unlearning bit, because I think men and fathers have always been good enough generally, given, you know, we're an evolving species. We're always evolving into something different. So you just want to challenge that men don't need to be better. no one needs to be better. We're just evolving.
Great. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. James, can I come to you, please? When a parent realizes their relationship with their teen boy has become distant or disconnected, what are the first things they can do to help rebuild trust and openness?
I think that the word apology is a good start. I've actually used that many times as a starting point with some of the difficult conversations that I've need to have, or when I've needed to express concern, by starting out by acknowledging that maybe I've missed something, maybe I haven't approached something correctly. I think we need to acknowledge that the beginning point might be it's our miss. And to start by stating that quite clearly, to tell our young person, to tell our son, I'm sorry if I've got this wrong, or I'm sorry if I've not handled this well. And it's a part of the reason why we are having this friction. Because truthfully, that's possibly the case. We do know that a lot of the times with our parenting, that it's got a lot to do with our own selves and what's being triggered within our own selves. And so I think a beginning point of being authentic, and we talk about with our young men, we want to help them to learn the layers that exist within them. And to help them to get to know themselves better. And that comes through vulnerability. So what better way than to display that in your role modeling, to say, I can be vulnerable with you and let you know that I don't always get it right, and start there. And I guess the important thing as well, when we're worried about our sons enough that we need to have a conversation, how do you have that conversation? Like, you don't start it as an ambush down the hallway. You don't start it as they walk in through the door from school and they've just barely put their bag down. Son, I need to talk to you. They're starting to get into a world of entering into adulthood where their employer would make times for them to attend their work, their shifts. They're in a world where their appointments will be made with them in their schools, etc. We should be doing the same. If we need to have a tough conversation about some concerns that we have about them, that we feel a disconnection in our relationship, or whatever it might be, we should ask them for a time. We should say to them, I'd like to sit down and have a chat with you about this topic, and make a time to do that, side by side or across a dinner table or out in a park, and give them time to prepare thoughtfully for that conversation, and show them the respect that you've just not, as I said before, you've just not ambushed them with your concerns about them and then expect them to respond with reflection and insight. It's quite ridiculous when you think of it, isn't it? And so that would be what I would say. I would say, first of all, start at a place of authenticity. Start with a statement of your own apology of where you might not be getting it right, and then be willing to make a time to try to talk through that concern with them in a respectful way that honors their development into a young adult.
That's beautiful, James. Absolutely beautiful, and well said. We've got quite a few questions and not so many minutes left in this webinar, so I might jump straight to the first question here Jason has put up, which is, I'd really like to have the panelist view on how a father can be present for their boys when separated from their mother and the mother is trying to push the father out of their lives. James, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, this one's close to the nerves for me, because I tell you, working with men in mental health for many years, this comes up very commonly. I would advocate, first of all, a respectful assertion on the behalf of men to say you matter, and don't let any system tell you otherwise. And that is where the problem is. The problem is within our system, and it needs to change. It is better than what it was. The family law court system, for example, is better than what it was, but it still needs to change so much more to honour the equal importance of parents in the lives of their children. So I'd recommend that, yes, please be assertive, please stand your ground, please don't let anybody tell you that you don't matter. Maintain that position that you do matter and that you want to have a place. And the words to use is not about rights. It's not about your right. Any parent, is incorrect in stating that it's their right. What you're really needing to saying is my responsibility. It's my responsibility to be a part of the raising of my children and to provide for their care and their development. And I will not rest until I deliver on those responsibilities. That's the best that I can say. But to honour the fact to the men out there that are faced with these difficulties, you're not alone. There are many. And look, let's also be fair here. It's not always as divided as you would think. There are plenty of mothers that have had similar experiences, and the problem is within our system. We need to change the system that allows for the opportunity for parents to be involved in their children's lives and to provide for them and to be responsible for their care. I hope that that's a good enough answer on a very difficult and complex problem.
It absolutely is. Thank you very much. What I might do is jump to the next question, because that was quite a comprehensive answer. For Tom or James, this one is a question on risk-taking behavior. During these years, the frontal lobe is still developing. How do we explain this to our teens, that some of their behavior could be risky because of this? Sex, drugs, risky driving, without vilifying them. I want them to be aware that there will be times when they'll have those key decision-making moments and open the door for them to come to me, but I don't want them to feel terrified of what lies ahead and doubt themselves. Tom, can you give us an answer for that one, please?
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, our approach is to help them to understand themselves more emotionally. So understand the chain reaction that's going on inside of themselves, and have a deeper sensitivity for where the origins of those decisions are. So one of the things I think is to strengthen their ability to make their own decisions, rather than to feel influenced by, well, they'll never not be influenced by the peer dynamic, but recognize the ability to be aware of that influence, but not have that dictate their following actions. And then just to understand their emotional life, what's going on inside them, to have emotional literacy. What does it feel like when you're coming up to one of those moments? What does it, what's the triggering cause? A neighbour was over the other day and she was talking about fainting, and that she'd been through an episode of, episodes of fainting. And I was like, oh, do you get on the ground for those, or is it just falling over? And so the interesting thing is I've had to teach myself about the signs. Initially, I would just fall over, or someone would see me and catch me. But over time, I managed to work out what the signs were, to the point where I would unconsciously just sit down and lie down on the ground in the supermarket. And I think we need to kind of help guys to build that same emotional literacy. There's biological things going on that can be a headwind to impulsive actions. But we can always increase their awareness so that they're more empowered to be able to make the choices that are going to serve them best.
Great. Thank you very much. Rae, what roles do schools play in fostering positive, healthy masculinities and pro-social behaviors? Will has asked us this. The behaviors and relationships with their fathers that schools can encourage. Can you suggest any impactful interventions and strategies that schools are utilising?
Well, that's a really, really big question with not much time, but I'd say all schools are different in my experience. I hear very different reports, and it's not about public-private either. It's about the people who are in the schools, the teachers, their commitment, their care, and also...
Oh, we've lost you again, Rae.
For our kids while they're there. They should obviously, but we also have to be playing a role in creating I think is my internet still okay? We also have to be creating relationships with our children's teachers and caregivers at the schools. We need to have that connection in as well, to understand who is taking care of our children and what they're doing with them, and having that sort of triangulation going on. So I think, again, putting it back to the responsibility of parents to understand where our kids are going to, who's there when they get there, and how to help manage that. So I hope that helps a little bit. With fathers, going back to the original question that was posed to James, I don't agree that the system is supporting men at all, and some women to that degree. For those men, I see upstream, or sort of we get further downstream, that suicidal trifecta of relationship breakdown, financial distress, and loss of custody of kids it makes me cry every single day. So I'm there. I'm doing everything I can every single day to help men navigate through that, but also through policy making, through Global Action on Men's Health and Australian Men's Health Forum to change that as fast as possible. The best you can do with your kids, write a diary every day, write them a note to them and tell them something about you every day. So one day when you do reconnect with them, you can give them that journal and say, every day I thought about you and here it is.
That's beautiful, Rae. Thank you. James, last questions for you. Any tips on establishing a workplace forum and safe place for parents to share and support each other on many of the challenges discussed today? A parents network or group? That's from Mark.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, that most organizations are open to this idea. So we have seen a lot of organizations, when we think about providing for psychological safety at work and support at work, they're very aware of the need to support parents and families in your workplaces. So if you have an idea like that, to approach somebody within your HR, or people and culture is often the name for it, and put forward that idea, and I think you'd be surprised that the support is there. And also a shout out for the Fathering Project. I think that we've got some good examples of similar groups of parents groups within workplaces that Káti or Maddie, who's helping with our webinar today, could put you in touch, Mark, and help you to see how it's already being done in some organizations. That would be, I think, really helpful as a good starting point. So I'll put you in touch, and perhaps Maddie might reach out to Mark after the webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We have run out of time, so I would like to thank you, James, Rae, and Tom, for joining us today, for bringing us your insight, wisdom, and everything to today's session, and the work you do every day to support boys and the people raising them. I hope everyone watching leaves today feeling a little more equipped, a little more confident, and maybe a little more hopeful as well. Whether it's asking one brave question or simply showing up with quiet presence, what we do as parents matters. We keep hearing that, and we need to understand how we can show up well. A reminder that if you'd like to revisit this session, we'll be sharing the recording shortly after the session. And if something you heard today really resonated, we encourage you to start a conversation at home with your partner or with other parents. You don't have to do this alone. Remember that. If you'd like further resources, we have some information up on the screen now, which includes links to our panelist work, as well as resources that are available from us here at the Fathering Project, including online lunch and learn sessions delivered to workplaces. We'll be hosting a range of sessions for Men's Health Week in June, if this is of interest to you. Thank you again for joining us, and wishing you a fantastic relationship with your teenage son and a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.